Think of it this way. Why on earth, after the Democrats did everything in their power to flood America with millions of indigents from across the globe, would Republicans ever give Biden an opportunity to take a victory lap and then pretend that he's done anything to solve this problem?
Fox News' Laura Ingraham is now saying out loud what I think is one of the most absurd things to advocate for. Do nothing about the migrant crisis, keep complaining about the migrant crisis, but God forbid you pass any legislation to deal with the migrant crisis because it could potentially help Biden win the 2024 presidential election. Now, we had shared a story with you all just last week involving a Republican lawmaker who said something very similar. But here you have someone who very regularly complains about the migrant crisis on her program, advocating for GOP lawmakers to do absolutely nothing about it. And in the meantime, border cities are inundated with migrants seeking asylum. You have blue cities who are experiencing an influx of migrants due to various states like Texas, for instance, busing migrants to them. And so this is an issue, and it is a problem because cities are not well equipped to deal with it. They don't have the housing necessary, the resources necessary to keep these people safe, especially as temperatures drop all across the country. And so let's get to the details about what is transpiring in Congress in particular, and just how useless, feckless, and pathetic our current Congress happens to be. So again, even though Laura Ingraham and her colleagues at Fox spend tons of time, prime real estate on their shows, complaining about the border, they don't want to do anything about it. Reporting yesterday indicated that Republicans in the Senate, though, might agree to a deal this week. Now, the senators and the White House have, in fact, reached a high-level agreements on a few provisions pertaining to immigration legislation. For instance, it appears that the White House has agreed to tightening asylum interviews, expanding expedited deportations, and also creating an authority to expel migrants without humanitarian screenings when border agents are overwhelmed. So just pause to absorb that. The White House has basically conceded to a lot of the provisions that Republicans have been demanding. And it appears that some portion of the Republican Party is like, yeah, but no, we're very unlikely to help you by passing this legislation and doing anything about the migrant crisis for that matter, because the election's coming up and we want this to be an issue that we can campaign on. So the negotiators have not resolved their differences on immigration parole, which is a legal tool used by the Biden administration to resettle hundreds of thousands of migrants that Republicans want to severely limit. It's the program that they refer to as catch and release. They essentially just want to reject as many people as possible right at the border without allowing them to make an asylum case. Now, senior White House officials have previously told Democrats in Congress that they would not accept the Republican demands to restrict parole. But during a White House meeting on Friday, Biden advisors recognized that a border deal with Republicans would not be possible without the administration agreeing on limiting parole. So in other words, even when it comes to the sticky issues, the sticky provisions, Biden's like, okay, fine, maybe we'll consider it. Maybe we'll pressure, Senate Democrats to go along with this. But again, despite that tentative agreement already including much of what Republicans have demanded, and signs that Democrats will cave even more, Ingraham ordered Republicans to resist. In fact, she called Biden and the Democrats frauds for even attempting to address this dire situation.
Now, after Mayorkas and Biden have already greenlit, what is it, like really 12 million migrants into the United States already? They think that they can force Republicans to agree to a bad deal or get the public to blame them if they don't. What frauds? Anything drafted by some Chamber of Commerce flunky on immigration is meaningless. Mayorkas will simply take the money and use it to settle migrants in the United States more quickly, more efficiently. Isn't that great? So Republicans should get out of these ridiculous negotiations. If House Republicans do the smart thing and say no to this raw deal, Speaker shouldn't even consider. He should say out of hand, he's rejecting it. The Biden campaign is gonna hit the airwaves with the message, you probably already made the commercials, see, the border's their fault. Bottom line, you can't make a deal with someone who has no intention of fulfilling the terms of the deal.
Now, I hope that you guys caught the lie that she told there. As I explained to you, the White House has agreed to expediting deportations, not expediting asylum approvals to settle migrants in the country. In other words, she's making it seem as though the Biden White House is looking to open the border even more and allow for more asylum seekers to be approved right away. That is not the case. There's a lot of caving going on, and the caving isn't happening with GOP lawmakers. The caving is happening with the Biden administration and Democrats. That's what's happening. But she's twisting the story to make it seem as though the Democrats are playing this game to bring more migrants into the country when that's just not the case. And look, guys, previously, obviously, we've been skeptical of allegations of a migrant crisis, but the numbers are real. And in December alone, about 300,000 migrants came in just a single month. We do have a broken immigration system, and we do need solutions. I do not agree with Democrats making all these concessions with Republicans, especially when Republicans are engaging in bad faith and really have no interest in passing any reforms or any legislation because they see it as giving the Democrats a win. We're just caught in this unbearable gridlock, and the people who really end up suffering at the end of the day are ordinary people and the migrants themselves who really have no place to go. They're ending up in cities and towns that don't have the resources to house them, feed them, clothe them. And what ends up happening typically is as they wait for their asylum cases to be heard, they get exploited by employers who know that they can exploit them because they feel that they don't have any legal recourse. And so a lot of corporations actually do favor illegal immigration because they take advantage of those workers. And so it's just a lose-lose situation for pretty much everyone, except for the politicians playing these disgusting games. I've got more details on this story, but I do want to pause for comment. What are your thoughts on this, Waz?
I mean, you can't be surprised by what Laura Ingraham is doing with this game she's playing. Obviously, it's not her job to go out and govern, right? Her job is to yell at Republicans when they're not being sufficiently hard-headed, boneheaded enough to her liking. She, as you can see from the clip, and even if you watch her entire show, at no point does she point to a policy or a strategy or a law that the Republicans should pursue in its stead and try to get Biden to pass instead. She's just rejecting the idea out of hand that Joe Biden should be allowed to pass anything, even if it's something that Republicans love and want. And again, there's this concept of being a party of opposition. And when you're not in power, you should be in opposition of things that sort of hinder your ability to further your agenda, right? When the things that you want, you can't go out and make them happen, you can be opposition to the things that make it harder for you to achieve those things in the future. Being in opposition to things that you like just because you want to score political points doesn't make any sense. It's either you want to have something done about the situation at the border with the migrants, or you don't. This idea that you want to have it done and score as much political points as possible is stupid because it says that you can't score political points anyway. That you can't come out and say, we brought Joe Biden to the table. We're the ones who made him do it. Made him do it. Y'all know the Democrats love them damn immigrants. It was us that made them kick them out. Like, this is so easy to brand, but the Republicans have been so wedded to this concept that they exist just to oppose Democrats, not to oppose policies that they don't like, even policies that they agree with, except for the military industrial complex. They don't have no problem just collaborating on that. But this has just been their mode. But again, you can't be surprised by what Laura Ingraham has to say. And one last thing, because I was in New York City for damn near a month this past month during the holidays and stuff. The migrant stuff is a topic of conversation amongst people. The resources, they just don't have all that it takes to, receive these folks. They're doing the best they can, but like as far as shelters and civil services and all of those things are being overrun. It's New York freaking City, and we don't send migrants to the sticks. We don't send them to rural America. We send these folks to the big cities that, again, the sort of infrastructures are being strained from lack of funding to begin with.
I actually think as long as there is consent and these migrants aren't being lied to, I think sending them to blue cities makes a lot of sense. And I'm actually a little grateful that that happened, mostly because it opened my eyes, and I'm sure it opened the eyes of a lot of Democratic voters who had been told by liberal media over and over again that there is no crisis, it's totally made up. No, it's not made up. It turns out that at the moment, there absolutely is a migrant crisis and our immigration system is broken. Now, obviously, there are disagreements in how to respond to that. And I think that being incredibly vicious to asylum seekers is not the right way to go with this. But also at the same time, there does need to be some laws that help reinforce our border because we don't have the resources to just allow anyone to come in. We obviously have a housing crisis right now. We don't have enough shelters to house the migrants coming in. It's just, again, a lose-lose situation for everyone involved. And I would like to see a far more, assuming that these negotiations they were engaging in them in good faith, I would have liked to see something that was at least a little more mixed instead of being full of concessions to the hard right on this issue. But again, it doesn't even matter what I want. It doesn't matter what you want. If you're a Republican voter, it doesn't even matter what you want, because what we are experiencing right now is the GOP literally creating a worse situation so they can campaign on it. Okay, typically you elect people to represent you and fix problems. We currently have a Congress that's hell-bent on making problems worse so they can campaign on it. I'll give you a specific example. Let's go to graphic 3. You have Representative Troy Nehls from Texas, a state that of course is impacted by the migrant crisis. And he says, let me tell you, I'm not willing to do too damn much right now to help a Democrat and to help Joe Biden's approval rating. I will not help the Democrats try to improve this man's dismal approval ratings. I'm not going to do it. Why would I? Chuck Schumer has had HR 2. That's an even more extreme right-wing proposal, and he did nothing with it. And the reason why he did nothing with it is because Democrats looked at it and they're like, no, this is dead on arrival. This is far too extreme. And we're not even having a conversation about this. Let's actually engage in good faith conversations where there are concessions on both sides. But clearly that's not gonna work. And in another conversation with Laura Ingraham, Senator Ron Johnson even bragged about blocking efforts to reach a deal.
We keep seeing headlines about how Republicans in the Senate are committed to working out a border deal with Democrats. But why? Let's let the voters decide the border issue next year. Forget the deal, it will be a raw deal. Joining me now, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson of the Homeland Security Committee. Senator, I have a very, very bad feeling about any deal in the works. Am I wrong?
Merry Christmas, Laura. No, you're not. And that's why I've been pretty well leading the effort to slow this process down. I think we were largely successful. They recessed the Senate, did not take a vote on the supplemental or any kind of border security measure.
Senator, they want cover going into next year's election, saying, oh no, we struck a deal with it's a bipartisan deal. We have this under control. A complete lie.
Imagine being a lawmaker, going on national television and bragging about how you're working real hard to be a useless bum. That's what Ron Johnson just did. Absolutely useless. Final words, Waz?
Just the idea, she said we should wait a year for this, which again, it doesn't make sense. It's incongruent with the idea that this is a crisis and an emergency and something that Biden should be losing political points for in the first place. If it's really bad, if it's horrible, if it's completely, anathema to what you would want as a quote unquote conservative voter, then you should want to put an end to it or make it better immediately. They always use the house on fire rhetoric. If the house is on fire, you don't say, oh, I'll put it out next week when it's completely burnt to the ground, because right now, I don't know, like I could do an insurance fraud. It's like, what are we talking about? Like, just bring the hose and get things better. And I hate to use something that crass, but it just doesn't make sense that this could be, again, this being in dire need of our attention, of our government having to do something because it's not going the way that allegedly Laura Ingraham and her people want. Then something should be done immediately. This idea of quote unquote, let the voters decide, that's just a complete crock and a dodge.
100%, 100%. They're using this as a campaigning tool. And look, this reminds me of like people who tend to have so-called luxury beliefs, right? People who live in their gated communities, urging for super soft on crime legislation that, disadvantaged communities end up bearing the brunt of, right? You have lawmakers, many of whom are millionaires themselves. They're not really worried about the migrant crisis impacting their communities. They're living in their gated communities and their nice homes, and they're protected. They're not worried about a damn thing. But communities in the districts that they represent are impacted by it. And because Democrats are so bad at messaging, I mean, they're not talking about the obstruction that's currently taking place in regard to this legislation. Republicans get to run their campaigns purporting that the Democrats refuse to do a damn thing about the migrant crisis. And that's just not true. It's sick. We do have a broken system. And again, the people who end up bearing the brunt of that are ordinary people, including those who vote these goofballs into office in the first place.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.